All right, we are going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to this regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architecture Review. Staff will introduce each item, followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes. The chair will then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After questions are closed, the chair will ask for comments from the public. For each application, members of the public are each allowed 3 minutes to ask questions and 3 minutes to offer comments. Speakers shall identify themselves and provide their address. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, that is, regarding only the exterior aspects of a project. Following the BAR's discussion and prior to taking action, the applicant will have up to 3 minutes to respond. We had our pre-meeting discussion, and now we move to our regular meeting. The first item on the agenda are matters from the public not on the agenda. Do we have any matters from the public that someone would like to discuss?
I don't see.
Does not.
Yeah, Remy, I don't see any hands raised, so.
If anyone joining us virtually would like to speak at this time, click the raise hand icon in Zoom, or if you're joining us via telephone, press *9. Chair, there are no hands raised at this time.
All right. Our next item is the consent agenda. The only item on the consent agenda is approval of meeting minutes from March 19th, 2024.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. I know we want to quickly get down. I know Mr. Timmerman's got something he has to get to. The first item before you tonight, it's a COA request for 101 East Jefferson Street. This is the First United Methodist Church. You recall a year and a half ago or so, the discussion about the solar panels and the removing of the slate, installation of an asphalt roof, and then allowing the solar panels to be installed on top of that. A couple of weeks ago, speaking with the architect, the idea was they proposed the idea of using a standing seam metal roof in lieu of the asphalt, which makes a lot of sense because now the panels can clip onto the standing seam and not be, doesn't have to penetrate the roof through the asphalt. As you recall, this was something that was approved by council on appeal. So where I normally would have been very comfortable saying that switch makes a lot of sense, because council had approved the prior COA, it left me in a bit of limbo. So the instruction I got was to take it to you all and get the vote on it as a regular COA. So this is not to review again the solar panels. This won't change that at all. This is simply to use the standing seam metal on the sections where the panels will be installed in lieu of the asphalt roof. And I know Bill is here and Rupert and people are here, but if you all don't have any questions for me, and I don't take it from here, you guys.
We had some discussion in the pre-meeting about this. Do we want to go ahead and make a motion?
I think let's see if the follow back to you with questions from the public and the applicant has.
Right. Do we have any anyone from the public that wants to speak on this item? All right. Do we want to have the applicant speak?
I'm Bill Owens. I'm the architect representing the church. I don't really have too much to add beyond what Jeff said. After the COA was issued, we changed roofers and brought Jack Maslow from Lynch on board. And he made us aware of this new system, different system for mounting the solar panels that clamp to the standing seam of a standing seam metal roof, which made a lot more sense than the flashing system that required a penetration at each mounting location. The clamps require none. Pretty much thought it was a no-brainer, and since that the concept was whatever the roofing is, it's not going to be seen. It's supposed to be under the solar panels anyway. And the integrity of the roof was sort of an issue when we started this whole process to begin with. We thought it was sort of a no-brainer to swap the two out. And we had already committed to salvaging these shingles and replacing them should the solar panels go away sometime in the future anyway. So we thought it was pretty much a lot of logical sense to do that, so we hope you agree.
Do we have any questions from the board? All right. Do we have any comments from the board?
I have a motion, Mr. Chair. Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the ADC district design guidelines, I move to find allowing the standing seam metal roof in lieu of asphalt shingles where existing slate will be removed to accommodate solar panels at 101 East Jefferson Street satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with the property and other properties in the North Downtown ADC district, and the BAR approves the request. Furthermore, it is understood that the COA will serve to modify the prior COA, which City Council issued, and maintain the 4 conditions of approval with the last condition modified as follows. If the solar panels are removed, where there have been slate roofing, the standing seam metal roof will be replaced with either slate or a suitable faux slate shingle.
A second?
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Timmerman,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Gestinger, and I vote aye as well. So your application has been approved.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
You all, thank you for your patience on that. Bill, I got a little bit of a, what do you call it? Didn't know how to solve this one, so this was the way I was instructed to, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you all.
All right, and Mr. Timmerman, thank you very much. Go put on your Batman suit and go to your next mission. Next on the agenda is a preliminary discussion about 218 West Market Street. You all had reviewed this several times relative to a demolition request and a special use permit request. The demolition COA is still in place, still valid, but everything you had talked to prior, the other building, the step backs, that's a non-issue now. This is a new design that's coming before you. Well, actually, not even the design yet, sort of the massing scale and sort of a general a discussion. So I know it's only 4 of you, but I think we can still get something fruitful out of this and allow their project to continue moving forward. So there's not a lot. I know Neil did send me, here, Brad, scoot that. Neil sent me a modified site view, but it seems there's a lot of stuff about the zoning. I think about the percentage of the frontage. It's not necessarily something you all are be evaluating, but I know Neil will refer to it, so I think there's some adjustments, and I'll let him tell you what he changed on there. I just made copies and brought it. I don't have any questions other than, again, preliminary discussion, no action will be taken. The goal here is to review the information that the applicant has, and certainly to answer any questions that they have, and then for you all to the opportunity to direct the applicant on what would be necessary for them to bring forward a successful application. So with that, I'll hand it off. Jeff, your team, take it from here. And I'll put up whatever you want me to.
I'm just want to make the introduction and reintroduce myself to BAR. Jeff Levine, 600 West Main Street. Been before you on several sites, and particularly this site before, and we're taking a little pivot here, not a little pivot, we're changing our use from residential, where worked well with you to go through an SUP process on that, but instead we're going to switch over to hotel use, which we're excited about, bring visitors from down to the downtown mall and expose more people to the mall. So I'm going to just want to make an introduction to my hotel partner. Al Patel is here. He can answer any more particular questions about hotel operations, as he and I are collaborating together to do this. And I have Cassidy and Neil. Neil's on the phone to go through the presentation and walk you through what our general ideas are. And as Jeff pointed out, we don't have necessarily any specifics on design per se, but we'd like to get some initial feedback because we'd like to continue on our design. And our goal is to be before you, I'm going to say probably the June meeting, with something a little more tight, and whether looking for approval or just getting a better understanding, but that's kind of our time frame. So, Cassidy, I'll turn it over to you.
Actually, Cassidy is at the meeting, and she's the director for design. So I'll let Cassidy, since she's in person there, to explain our design.
All right, thank you, Neil. If we can flip one page. So as I'm sure you're all aware, there's some unique aspects of this site that kind of provide a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenge for us. So we are working with a site that has 2 street frontages at different heights, both across each street frontage and from front to back. And we are also working with 0 lot lines on the side. So we're trying to meet all of those accommodations in our response. So in our first sheet, what you're looking at is the old Preston Ave frontage there. The Market Street frontage is actually a number of feet higher, so we'll be about a half a story, a little more than a half a story above this. But starting out on the old Preston Ave side, you're coming right off that pedestrian mall, and so we really want to have a gentle accommodation onto our site. So all of the retail is pushed up against that mall, so it can kind of provide a continuation of that onto the site. And then directly adjacent to that is access to the hotel through that staircase, and that's a larger, more pleasant experience staircase rather than a utilitarian staircase for people to travel from the hotel, so they can go directly out onto that mall and enjoy that. And then over on the right side of there, you see more of the functional aspects of the building with the loading and garbage and the valet parking. So we've pushed that off the street frontage just a little bit to try to shield it, so it has a slight setback there. And then we've kind of compressed it as much as possible with a single lane entrance exit valet, so that we don't have that taking as much of that frontage up. And we kind of minimize that so we can give the maximum amount to more of those pedestrian-friendly uses and keep all of the utilitarian uses as far from that mall as possible. And as mentioned, that is a valet parking, so we're trying to maximize what we can provide on site for parking, both here, and you'll see it up above as well. So if you want to flip to the next slide, that is the Market Street entrance. And so this is the entrance to the hotel. You can see the setback line, the active depth line there. If you have questions on that, please let me know. We can kind of go over the ins and outs of that. But mainly what I want to cover is we will have a drop-off lane there, so people can drop off, and then the valet can valet their cars from there as well. Again, we try to maximize kind of that active use with conferencing space, with lobby space, and the entrance to the hotel, and keep some outdoor amenity space up there as well in that front corner. Most of the rest of the inside is just hotel function is what you're seeing, and from there you can actually see where from that bar it goes down to the mall area. If you flip to the next street, or next slide, excuse me, you'll see where the valet comes up, and we keep that parking concealed on Market Street, so you really will not read that. We will create a nice aesthetic on the exterior so that that's not going to read as a parking level on either frontage. But because it's on the second floor at Market Street, it's a floor higher at Old Pres, on Market Street, we wanted to keep it stepped back and keep that active zone activated with guest rooms on that level. And then once you move up above that level, it moves into more of a tower element, and we've tried to, you'll see where we do have setbacks on both the front and back, as far as we can push it without encroaching on circulation of travel and that kind of a thing. And we also do want to maintain a level of distance between the two towers. I guess it's one U-shaped tower, but we want to keep a distance between the front of the U and the back of the U so that people aren't waving at each other out of their guest rooms. And then we also do push back on that side setback as well. And that floor plan is going to be the same all the way up to the top floor plan, where you'll see, if you flip third floor, the fourth and fifth floor are extremely similar. There is an outdoor amenity space on the third floor in the middle. And then up on the top floor, you have your patio and your rooftop bar, which are going to provide views and another active space that kind of serves the community there. So I know that's a sky-high perspective of this. If you move into the section on the next page, there you go, you can get a better sense of the different elevations that we're working on with the retail on Old Preston Avenue, and then the Market Street being, was it 8 feet above that for your hotel lobby, and then parking and guest rooms up above. And on the last sheet, we do have some very preliminary blocking and massing plan or perspectives here, so you can just get a sense of the different elements of the building. We are still working out materials and details and all of that type of thing, but we just wanted to kind of show the pedestal element that will be there, where we can show more of a sensitivity and bringing it down to a pedestrian scale, especially on Old Preston Avenue, where you're coming straight off that mall, and still respect the fact that we are getting into an area of higher buildings, with the Code building being right there, so we're very comparable in height with that, and responding to that with more of the tower element. So I know, again, that was a very fast zip through. I'm sure there's lots of questions and clarifications, so please feel free to shoot anything you have. We are looking for your feedback so we can make sure we bring forward the best project for you guys.
Do we check the public for questions? No, we just had.
Discussion.
Not a public hearing.
Oh, right. Questions from the board? I have a question on outdoor amenity space. I see on the site plan, there's a number of 2,573 required. And I see the development code that you've included, which is helpful, thank you, asks for 10% of, I guess that's the site footprint would be my guess.
Mhm.
And I see a couple of places carved out in the plan, one on Old Preston and then one on the Market Street side. Can you just describe how you anticipate those starting to get used?
Yeah, we haven't gotten into the details of how those will be used, especially coming off of the mall. I can see that as, a pedestrian support space with, potentially tables and chairs. Maybe it's served off of whatever retail's there, as a support space there. As we move forward, I think we'll have a lot more detail when it comes to that stuff. But right now, we're just kind of reserving it so we know that we can respond to those. We know we have that space available to provide the outdoor amenity space.
I guess what I'm starting to get at is it seems like it's already kind of short of the number required, so just kind of wondering how
So
that
most
gets-
of the outdoor amenity space that serves the facility is actually up on, if you look at A103, on that third floor.
So that
so-
would be public space?
Can I jump in one second?
Yeah.
The code, it doesn't, the definition of public space doesn't mean that it has to be available to the public at large. It's just 10% of the footprint has to be outdoor space if you actually read it. And if it is truly for public, you actually get a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you provide 100 square feet of true public space, it counts as 200 square feet. So we are mindful of that, and so we're very confident that between the open amenity space in the building on top of floor 3, as well as on Preston and a little bit on Market, will well exceed the roughly 2,500 square feet.
Right, and what we're showing now does not include the 2-to-1, although it's likely that some of this would be public space. But right now, I wanted to give you just the straight numbers without that 2-to-1, so that we know that we're covered.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying.
On Market Street, you've got your little pull-off for the guest parking. Are you bumping into there's currently a parking lane that's right there on Market. Am I seeing that the sidewalk, you've got like a bulb out that's filling that parking lane, and then you're kind of pulling in a little further than the current curb? Is that?
Right,
Okay.
right. So we had initially looked at adding a pull-off lane that was on our site. But with the setbacks, and the maximum setback, we were exceeding that, and so we couldn't do that. So we pushed everything back out to make that drop-off lane
Okay.
more of a street frontage lane.
But basically, the drop-off area, you're using the parking lane?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So all of that would then go into valet, you know, both on the lower level and the upper level, second level.
What was changed on this that you gave us today from the original submission? Staff wasn't quite sure.
Just the name, I think, right?
Neil
Yes.
said-
There's proprietary branding on it that we just wanted to pull off for publication.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, no, it was on the site plan that Neil sent me this afternoon. What,
Oh, on the site plan?
Oh, it was, in the lower right block, it talked about frontage required and frontage
That-
meant, and
that's
there's an
what I-
adjustment, and it went up to like 98%. I'm trying to visualize, on the site plan in the lower right corner, we've given you the requirement and then what we're provided. Like, I think it says 0 spots are required, and we're providing 100 and something.
20, yeah.
It says frontage at some percentage, and we're at like 96, you know, are you looking at?
98%.
Well, I'm sorry, yeah, 98%. They had calculated that wrong, and it was like, it was, so, that's what we got. Fantastic, fantastic stuff.
Because you've memorized the code already, right?
I sort of memorized, I have to say, I did meet with James Freeze and walk through this already, so I could know what was, that we make sure we were as of right for everything. And I think we'll be doing that.
if I could, there are, in the staff report, I list some bullet points on the first page in the discussion. These were some of the elements that you all had from the prior review, and they did still seem germane, so, and I didn't know if you wanted to revisit those at all.
A couple thoughts on those when we get into comments. Are we there?
The current parking lot between the Artful Lodger and the Whiskey Jar building, is that part of the site?
Yes.
And any thoughts on how that gets used? The intention is to leave it a parking lot?
No, that's right there. They're building over it. They're building over
Yeah,
it.
we're using the entire footprint of the site. Right
Okay.
now, there's a building where Artful Lodger is, and there's also a parking lot. We'll raise that building, and then we'll use the entire
Right.
site.
Okay. I just didn't see that very clearly in the site plan, so going forward, would like to clarify that kind of stuff.
Well, okay, I guess this one's kind of,
Go ahead.
yeah. So I know you and I had spoken on the phone earlier, and I had mentioned the setback, and it sounds like you did talk to James, so that's great. I guess the part that I'm wondering about, though, is the streetscape requirements. And I believe you have to meet those because your property is more than 100 feet long. So, and I pulled out a couple of sections, and my understanding of the code, then what I think I've pulled out from the code is that if you can't meet the streetscape requirements because there's not enough room, your setback actually gets moved back, so that you then can put in the street trees that are required. So it looks like I see one street tree on the bottom left corner on Market Street, and then you've got one says Urban Tree and Silva Cell on Old Preston. But currently on the site, there's 6 Zelkova on Market Street and 2 pretty large willow oaks on Old Preston. And it would be a really big shame to lose those or not have a replacement. So I guess my big comment is I think you need to provide the streetscape that the code asks for. And I'm hoping that's okay, that you can squish your building a little bit.
Did we look at that, Cass? I don't know if we got that detail. But yeah, I know. We had pointed out, I know that there are trees there. I don't know the code as well as Jeff's saying, but I do know that there's.
I don't think anyone knows the code that well at this point.
There's provisions for
It's in this
tree
plan.
replacement and for
Mhm.
streetscape. We will dive into that further when we bring in, we'll have a landscape architect, but, yeah, I was looking, and and we're aware also of keeping that frontage as a certain percentage, so, yeah, we'll dig
Okay.
into that for next time, but thank you.
Okay, but yeah, it might end up squishing your building in, but I think the provisions from the code are that, again, if you can't provide the streetscape in the right-of-way, it becomes an access easement, and then your setback is based off of the edge of the access easement.
I do recall
So I can-
something about, yeah.
That's, it's so complicated. But the long-winded thing is, yes, I'd love to see some trees on both of these streets, since we are gonna be losing quite a few.
Yeah.
But that's a site plan thing. I mean, I think, as far as the building is concerned, I think you're doing all the right things. And it's a smaller building than we had approved for an SUP. So that's my big comment. I'm sure I've got a couple more, but
Well, the street trees were a topic of discussion previously, and in fact, part of what we had recommended to City Council regarding the approval of the SUP. And I think that those comments, for the most part, from our standpoint, are still pretty applicable. And so I would recommend reviewing those and seeing how being able in your future presentations, being able to speak to how they do that. Now I know that you're no longer suggesting providing the pedestrian access through, but the other elements are, I think, very much still applicable. My biggest comment or recommendation for you guys moving forward is just to acknowledge our role and what we need to review is very much related to that compatibility with the existing context, and in the documentation so far it's pretty non-existent. And so I find it even a little bit hard to review the massing because the existing context, other than the couple of little thumbnail 3Ds, are not shown. It would be helpful to see existing buildings in elevation, understand your thinking about how the design actually accommodates and is compatible with with that character defining feature. So not just even the mass of the district, but really the character. Understandably, this is an awkward site. It's an awkward shape. It's got context, but on the other hand, that can provide a lot of design, constraint, or like can lead to interesting architecture. I feel like this is like trying to jam uninteresting architecture into an interesting site, and so it's very. I'm interested in understanding a little bit more about how this program is relating to its context and going to be a net positive for the city. It is an important location. It is one of the most prominent locations, actually, from some of the approaches to the city.
Can I address that for one second? Yeah, we're very aware that what we really want to understand today is whether those floor layouts with those rooms would work. Carl's comment of you did the right thing, whatever it is, that's what we're looking for, because from that, we can then start decorating, if you will. But we had to understand that, and we are working with a brand, so there are certain requirements you follow and certain layouts you follow. So we first just wanted to hear this looks okay as a layout. Now bring us all the stuff that I've been through with you before to understand that it is within context. One of the directions I was very particular about to the team was about that corner on the mall and making sure we really activate that and bring the mall. Right now, I kind of feel like that's just like a dead cavern where retail and everything goes to die. So I really want to bring life to that. And so we'll bring you some images of that, and we'll bring you the exterior. And even though we lowered, it won't be as prominent as the 13 stories that are allowed in the zoning. If we went that high, we do understand that this will be seen. I don't think the lighthouse will be built on so we do understand that.
Yeah.
So you'll get all that. But I wanted to kind of hear, you can go down, those corridors work and those rooms work.
Well, if I could just continue the one, I do think that street frontage on the corner of Old Preston is one of the most interesting contributions. I guess from a massing standpoint, one of the most interesting thing the building does is provide that upper level courtyard that breaks down the mass. But unfortunately, that's like on the one side where it's not really visible from many areas, and so it actually presents to the public its largest mass. It doesn't have much differentiation. It's quite flat across the north, west, and south facades, and so I don't know if I can really assess that from the elevations very well. Except the top one is the one that people will see the most, and that's probably the less interesting, less broken down, the most massive view.
I just wanted to comment, our purview has nothing to do with the interior programming, so we don't comment on the layout of your rooms or anything like that. Our purview is from the public right away and what the exterior looks like, and the programming obviously has to follow our guidelines and, what we would support, but looking at your room arrangement on the third floor, we will have no comments on that. The rest of our guidelines, if you haven't read them before, and I would encourage you to read them if you haven't, the staff report cited several, which are really helpful, but there are, the other comment I had personally was, I'm so glad that you say you'll activate the Old Preston Avenue side, because that's of particular interest to all of us, and that's just really, it kind of does space on two historic streets, which is a great opportunity. Like Breck said, there's a lot of opportunities here with a kind of a quirky site.
Can we move the newspaper
I'm sorry, what?
Can we move the newspaper things and the trash at the end of I'll work with, I'm working with James on that.
Yeah, yeah,
But no, I do understand
yeah, no.
that you
I'm
don't
with you.
have a purview on the inside, but as you affect mass, you do affect interior, because
Sure.
if you were like, we want to see 30-foot step, I'd be like, oh, I just lost, so that's what we were.
And I appreciate what you're saying as far as, you know, the view from Market Old Preston where those kind of meet and you're looking back at the building. And a lot of that, obviously, this is, like I said, a very basic massing.
Sure.
A lot of that will be broken up in materiality, in fenestrations, in all of those details. So it's not going to be a giant red blob emerging from a black hole base.
No, that's clear, and we're used to seeing
But-
massing models.
Yeah, and I want to, you know, make clear, we are making a point specifically with that view where, you know, you're right, we do not have the large outdoor amenity space there. We only have you do have that 10-foot setback where those meet. And then we do on the top floor, we will activate that kind of most prominent corner is where we're locating the bar and that outdoor seating. So that will add another interest, another element of, you know, dynamic design that you will see as those get developed. But as far as, like Jeff was saying, as far as, you know, if you're looking at this and going, you know, we're gonna have very serious issues with essentially the shape of the building that's something we wanna respond to now. Because like he was saying, we do have requirements from the brand. You know, we wanna push it and maximize those setbacks, maximize the movement of the building while still meeting what we have to make it a feasible building.
I think some of the other things we can probably read from the floor plans, though, are where there will be windows and where there won't.
Yeah.
And it looks like the short ends of the towers probably won't have windows, similar with on the side that's facing Ridge Street, Ridge McIntyre. So that is probably something we do want to pay attention to, if that's going to be a concern or not.
Yeah, and a portion of that is because by code, we are not allowed to have windows within a distance of the lot line. So, of course, we do push back some of it to try to get some windows, like I said, on that ground elevation there. That will have a lot of fenestration, but you're right, those short elements, by code, we cannot have windows that close to a lot line for fire safety, in case someone else builds a tower right next door. We don't want fire jumping from building to building.
So in the staff report, there were, which I'm sure you read, and I'll just read these, because I'm sure you'll watch this video later and, you know, pick up on our comments, but some of the conditions of the SUP granting in 2019 are still pertinent. The buildings, I'll just read them. The building's massing will be broken up and provide compatibility with character-defining features of the historic district, provide adequate protection of adjacent historic structures, provide a plan to replace the street trees, we've already talked about that, improve the pedestrian character of Old Preston and Market. I think Market has some, you know, it's challenged because it's kind of a highway coming up the hill there, but, you know, anything in your programming that can help that. And then there won't be the pedestrian access. And then there are a number of design elements in chapters 2 and 3 and 4 in our guidelines that you can review as well, that, you know, not all of them may pertain, but some of them might. And I had other comments and I've lost track of where I was gonna, one thing I would say is, and I think you benefit from being right across from the Omni. You know, if we're looking at the surrounding environment, you know, at least that helps my consideration. It'll always be a larger building than at least this one, you know, which augurs for, you know, anyway, it is what it is, so.
And then the code building.
Yeah, and then, oh, of course, yeah, so, yeah. So, yeah.
Right. But that is our challenge is, that's the dark, not nicest side of Omni, so, and retail generally works with both sides of the streets being activated, so that's why Cassidy which you talked about doing the more utilitarian stuff as you head down Preston, you're across from the mechanical stuff. It's very hard for us to carry the retail that much further, because you'll we want to take the pedestrian from the mall down into the retail, but at some point, you'll be across from that dark Omni. So we're thoughtful of all that, and I'm
Well,
trying to.
and our hope is to kind of take, you know, those buildings that do have a much taller aesthetic and are far more vertical, and then you have a very horizontal in, you know, in the mall, in the pedestrian mall, and kind of merge those. So you're going to have that pedestal aesthetic that really draws you on a pedestrian scale, and then once you back up and you're looking at it, it's not just dwarfed. It still has the tower element that can kind of compete with those without taking that pedestrian scale away. So that's where, even though we don't have huge setbacks, I think materiality is going to really come into play, and just having a break there, you know, which can be emphasized with more architectural detailing up at the top of that pedestal to stop your eye, and your eye is reading, okay, as a pedestrian, this is a 3-story building or a 2-story building, depending on which side you're on. And then as you back up, you go, okay, that building isn't just getting buried by these ones next to it. And you'll see, I know it's hard to see in those, but that's what we will bring to you as we move forward. But if there was anything specific in this shape that you were like, I don't see how that's gonna work, we'd love to hear that now before we get into all those details and then go, we gotta start over.
Personally, I don't have an issue with the massing,
Okay.
you know, as shown. And I know it's rudimentary, but there are others that may have comments on it.
Yeah, I think if I could, my two thoughts. One, and from the prior SUP discussions, there was an awful lot said about that continuity through from Market Street to Old Preston. And, you know, it's ironic why we're not looking at the inside. We're talking about that space going through it. And how much you wanted to get into that. And I think the other thing I was going to offer, and I know we don't have the full BAR here, but at least we can maybe touch on it a little bit. We've been having a lot of discussions, particularly on the entrance corridor, about material selections and materials that are appropriate or not. We've had an interesting discussion about EFS, which Sherry, you would have enjoyed. But I think if there are any
That
thoughts.
was on Mr. Levine's past application.
Yeah, not his. It was the other really big project at the other end of town. But if
I think we discussed it at 612 too, to be honest with you.
we did, you're right.
But-
You're right.
Yeah.
So, you know, if there are, again, not to resolve it tonight, but I feel like the material discussion kind of reached a little ahead with the Verve and also some of the stuff that was used on 2117 Ivy. Again, both entrance corridor projects, but these new materials that are coming out, and how do they, you know, replicate or simulate. But if you had any strong feelings about it, I thought it would be helpful to touch on that. But not to solve tonight, just put it in your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing from our guidelines is durable and long-lasting materials, especially near the ground. But I think, I mean, Jeff, you've played this game with us many times. So, I will say, if you're looking for a little more specifics, I mean, some stuff that I really appreciate is that you have done the valet parking, so you've narrowed those entrances down as much as possible. I appreciate the fact that your lower level valet parking is set back, so I'm reading that as being, it'll be recessed back from the livery stable building, is that correct?
You're talking about
On the lower level, yeah. That
We-
pulls back away from the street, correct?
You mean the one next to the livery stable?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the livery stable is gonna stick out beyond the front of where that.
Right,
that-
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I appreciate the fact that it is recessed there, so you diminish it a little bit, so it's, again, it's,
I'm sorry, just
Mhm.
the livery stable will
It's
go
part
away.
of
That's part of that Artful Lodger site. That will go away. The
the-
adjacent.
yes.
Yeah, you're talking,
Sorry.
yes, okay, just so,
is that real? Wow. I
Yeah.
don't know why my mind is thinking it's part of the adjacent building, but.
it looks like it is, but yeah.
So the adjacent building,
Yes.
it's kind of pulled back from that, and it's, I mean, Old Preston has kind of been the Omni's alleyway, but I think when you guys are done with this, there is a chance for it to actually be a more contiguous street. I mean, your neighbor building has a fairly nice frontage to it.
Yep.
So, yeah, two pieces that I do appreciate. But again, yeah, just please get the streetscape in there. That's extremely important to me.
A lot of trees?
Yeah, I know, right? But it is, this requirements are, they're big requirements. Market Street is it's a downtown street, so it requires a 6-foot clear walk zone and 8-foot greenscape zone. And Old Preston is a local street, so it'd be a 6-foot clear walk zone and 5-foot greenscape zone. So that's, I don't know what the sidewalks are currently. I'm guessing they're probably about 8 feet, so I mean, you can do the math from that, but it does take a little bit of a chunk out of your building.
So back on the through access, I feel like a lot of these conversations regarding this site and the code building were well before my time on the BAR, but in my head, it was a requirement, and like reading that the CUP did require through access from Market Street to Old Preston. Why is it just given that that's not happening anymore?
I think for me, that feels like that was a planning condition. Or, I mean, it may have been a BAR condition, but it was a condition of the SUP was a planning mechanism. And as a BAR application, I feel like there's a little more by right ability for them to fill the site unless we have a reason from as the BAR to require a walkthrough. Does that make
It wasn't
sense?
a BAR requirement.
I don't know who it came from. Might
Yeah,
have
we
been.
didn't vote. I'm sorry, you all did not. You made a recommendation to council on the special use permit and suggested some conditions. And Carl, that's an excellent point. Thanks for pointing that out, that those would have been, I don't even remember how the SUP came out. I think they included some of that language, but no, that's no longer, these are things you expressed concerns for, but as far as requiring something through the interior of the building, no, you couldn't do that.
Which we do accommodate. We do have a walkway that does go from the front of Market through to Old Preston Street. Now, there's a height difference, so it is a staircase, but it does go from front to back, and that will be.
And that would be open and not secured all the time? Right.
I'm sure it would be secured at least part of the day, but presumably.
Yeah, of course.
It's an
presumably
interior.
During the day, you're gonna have
It's an
guests that
interior
wanna go
walkway.
out that back
Yeah.
door,
So, because
Sure.
and then come back
Sure,
in.
it just
Yeah.
isn't it's not a public path.
It's not a public
It's a little bit
path.
different.
it'd be like the shortcut through the Omni.
Right,
Yeah.
It's pedestrian flow, for your guests.
The
Visitors.
technical language of the SUP actually said during business hours. It didn't require it to be open forever. And the genesis, because I have the genesis is we were building a residential building and we had retail in a small residential lobby. It was less likely that there was going to be any pass-through. Here, we've addressed it by it being an open lot like the Omni, as Carl said, that you will be able to walk through it. And that was a big thing of planning. Did not want this, where people are trained now that they go from Market to Preston through there. We wanted to accommodate, they'll still be able to do it. And it's easier done with a hotel than the challenges that the residential was posing.
Yeah, I think hotel lobbies feel very public. I think what'll be difficult at the massing of this is having it feel transparent because there's that grade change.
Yes,
So-
that's
Yeah.
something we've been challenged with too.
It'll be
It's
more
very
like,
difficult to have, especially with the retail that we want to accommodate on the back end, obviously, because the half a story, it can't be below. So we're kind of in a challenging situation to have full transparency where you can look through the window and go, oh, it's over there. And that just may be something because of the nature of the building, and the half story between the two to meet the needs of providing that retail and maximizing that retail. We can't have the hotel extend all the way to the back wall to provide
Yeah.
the transparency.
so from our point of view, I think that earlier offering, I think, was a helpful way of breaking up the block, which I realize and I understand why it's not compatible with all of the with the current program. But I do think that it highlights to me that this building does create a very long street wall in combination with the other buildings on the block, and it ratchets up the need to be careful about this building feeling long and horizontal. And so I would look at some of the provisions in our guidelines that speak about the vertical meter of buildings downtown and in other parts of the city. The context, the historic context that you'll be fitting into. One of the things I wanted to, that will be challenging, or I'm just curious how it is, that especially where that I think maybe the most challenging is in the portion of the volume that is black in the model, given that a lot of that is either service spaces or parking. And so I wanted to see how you were anticipating addressing the parking and having that not feel like a building sitting on top of a kind of a 2-story or 2 or 3-story parking mass.
Sure, so so the lower level parking, we know that's pretty much concealed. Once you get past the entrance, it's not very visible. Once we flip to that upper level parking though that you were mentioning, there's a couple things we've done to try to have that more serve as an asset rather than a architectural drawback. So first of all, like we talked on Market Street, it's already pulled back from that street frontage, so you really aren't going to read that as a parking massing at all on that frontage because it's not. On the
Right. So you've got guest rooms on
your guest
the
rooms.
north
Oh,
side of the black
exactly.
mass on that one. Yes.
On the-
Showing my code expert, that's the active depth that's required on the primary street, so that the code is designed to address that, so you can't even have the parking up, so you
Yeah.
have that and on Preston, it's a secondary street, you don't have, but we'll address that in architecture, that's what Cassidy will get to, so.
Right. And so architecturally, so we already are on the lower level, pushing that retail frontage back, so the parking level will actually serve as a pedestrian covering, and we'll have, you can kind of see it if you flip back and forth on the plans, that there's like an overhang. So we'll be able to create kind of a covered, yeah, and you can see it in that section a little bit too. Kind of a covered area for the first level by having that parking up there. And then with the way that we do the fenestrations, and the way that we do the columns, it can kind of further break down the linear look of that building with some vertical elements that drop back more into the traditional scale and that traditional spacing that's going to carry it through onto the rest of the mall. That's really going to kind of keep the aesthetic that you've got going along the mall once you enter that space. I don't know if that responds to your questions or if
No,
that's
that
not what I was.
no, that
saying at all.
helps. So if I heard you right, that you're looking to provide some apertures that might relate to your other fenestration.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that building, you should not even really, other than the fact that the windows, rather than having glass, may have a decorative grating or something else. When you look at that, it shouldn't be a long linear opening like a parking garage. It's going to be punched window openings that follows the aesthetic of the adjacent buildings and follows the aesthetic going on below hand. So you shouldn't see a linear break visually when you're looking at that building when you hit the parking level. It should tie right into the rest of that pedestal and have a very cohesive look with the rest of it.
Okay.
I just have a comment that, thanks for carefully kind of walking us through how the different entries relate to the streetscape and the different plans, but I think just a more illustrative plan showing the building footprints, and then as the floor plans go up, the adjacent buildings, whether it's the Omni across the street, just knowing where those are.
Okay.
They're just not legible in the drawings, and like, I even got confused in the site plan as to where this footprint is in relation to the other buildings, so I
Mhm.
think that's.
More of a macro site plan would be very helpful.
Yeah, or just more illustrative of the buildings and not just lot lines. Yeah, a macro site plan would be great.
Elevations.
Yeah, elevations or sections.
Elevations,
would be good.
including the surrounding
Okay,
environment.
okay.
On that note, though, I am curious about the shape of the building on its western, get the cardinal directions all mixed up. On the western side, you've got kind of like a weird little triangular space. Is that just part of schematic design, or is that, I'm wondering what's gonna happen when that, are you gonna have this just tiny little shaft of space between the buildings,
Oh, are you talking about where we have that outdoor amenity space listed on the
No,
third
it's
floor?
just to the left of your, so on the second floor plan, it's the space to the left of your long ramp up to the valet parking.
Where it kind of jogs out?
Yeah, so there's like this
Okay.
weird kind of very slender triangular space that I think is gonna end up being, there'll be a building next to there.
Yes, I see what you're talking
Yeah.
about, yeah. So the function of that was more a matter of practicality. I'm trying to keep the building functioning rectilinear on the
Yeah.
interior, and the site is not.
Mhm.
So I had the option of either tying it to the right-hand sight
Mhm.
line or the left sight line, if I wanted to keep a rectilinear building that wasn't completely, just following the sight lines. So we are following the sight lines on two sides of the building.
I guess just as you develop this, just make sure it doesn't become some,
Become a creepy alley.
yes, creepy dead-end alley.
Yes, got it, okay. That is true.
Could we also, just because it's preliminary discussion, could we encourage the applicant to contact the other members and they could review it? I mean, we only have 4 out of 8 here right now, and you're welcome to contact the remaining members and get their feedback. 2 of them are practicing architects, another one is, pretty much an architect with UVA. And another one is, actually probably the person who lives closest to this of all of us, actually, Ron. So,
Okay.
yeah, so you're welcome to do that,
Thank you.
as you develop this.
Yep, I just keep going back to some of the, past several years of discussions and, the word permeability and that looking at this from basically Fellini's down to the corner. This is a long block, and what's the result going to be? So being able to sort of see, it's not a standard city block. And I think going back to the prior discussions was what that opening through the code building showed and presented. So that's, I think, just maybe again, a reminder. I don't get the vote, but it's that idea of what does this facade become, not just what is it with this building put into the current streetscape. So, and I just, again, the whole, and Jeff heard the word permeability over and over again on West Main Street, and so, but that idea of how does this continue through to the mall, or should it, and not through the building, but is there the understanding of a relationship from Market Street to Preston Avenue, or if that's even necessary here. So that's just my thoughts.
Jeff, you mentioned materiality earlier, and, I think this is a really prominent site, and especially coming up Market Street, you're gonna see that from a lot of different viewpoints. And I think some of the buildings along West Main Street, hotels and apartment buildings, that some of them sit higher and you see them from different viewpoints. Some of the least successful facades of those are when it's 4 stories of fiber cement that's flat panel that's in a trim piece that's painted the same color, and then after a few years, it gets sun bleached and gets splotchy, so, I don't know, just 4 stories of the same material, we've seen how that hasn't aged very well, on some of the buildings along West Main that are more recent, in massings that are similar size to this.
Okay, I would appreciate that feedback, that's very helpful.
I may be in the minority, but I wasn't here I was traveling at the last SUP meeting, I think. I don't find in the guidelines that this board can require, that permeability, pedestrian access from one to another. It certainly benefits your hotel, the programming for guests and visitors to be able to access it from, the mall side, as we would call it, and from Market Street side. But we have I'm just thinking on Market Street itself, we have, the largest building is the Enterprise Center, and that block has no permeability. I mean, a lot of the blocks on Market have no permeability between the numbered streets. The exception really on the mall would be Lewis and Clark Building with that walkthrough, which I don't know the history of how that came about. It predates the 33 years I've been in Charlottesville, so it must be a little bit older, but I think it was a city requirement. But it is quite unusual, and it's been a challenge for some of the merchants, in that space, in that particular building.
Yeah, and I specifically want to, not say through the building. It's a private space. Staying in hotels, I know it's always creepy if people are coming and going anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's that, looking at that length of the block, and this is an integral part of that whole, and just not sure what the solution is, but it's a question that, and you all certainly within your guidelines can, that perception of block length and the permeability of that wall and
I mean,
public space.
You're talking about like the level of openness of the street to the lobby, which I
Okay.
think that is something we.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I would echo Mr. Whitney's comments about, that this building, from a couple of different views, won't be it won't be that visible except from that intersection at Ridge McIntyre, Preston. You'll really look up to it. And
Yeah.
I think that's I think, the massing that we are most interested in, because most people, you'll just see it, and you've got that change in topo, It's just, you're looking up the skirt almost of what this building will be, really, when you're sitting down there at the intersection. So I think that, for me, that would be more important than, maybe the street side, of course, on both of the streets, but more important than even I think it's the north or northwest facade.
Yeah.
Which would be against some existing but smaller buildings and not as visible as you come down the street, if you're coming down Market that way. So I think that's what my concentration would be, as you're looking at materiality and differentiation and fenestration and things that'll break up those masses and make it look like an interesting building. Like, people go like, that looks really cool, I want to be there. So, yeah.
Anything else?
Do you guys have any other questions for us?
No, this was great.
Yeah, it's very helpful, thank you.
And to your point, I'm thinking that maybe we'll return in May for another discussion, and more board members will be here, and we can also advance some of this stuff, like maybe show some streets, take some of your thoughts, so we're getting more feedback. It'll still be a discussion. We'll get other members involved, hopefully, and then in June, we'll bring something that, might make it but it'll be much more of a, looking for an approval type package.
And Jeff's been, all the Jeffs. That's the one thing that's nice, is we haven't had 4 Jeffs on a phone call with this one. But Jeff's been through the process of when we were informed by legal, we couldn't do the incremental approvals. But on the projects on West Main that Jeff was involved with, I think, or at least 612 certainly, that process worked. And at some point in time, this has to become a a formal application. We can't just have continuous informal discussions because the public notice requirements are different for an application versus a preliminary discussion. But I think that that's reasonable to have a second discussion with the full board, and then the understanding that at some point it has to become a formal application, but we still have that process, that agreement by which we move through, and sort of the deferral at the end of discussions if necessary to continue. So I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank all the board members and Jeff Werner in particular. This discussion will be very useful, and we get some very interesting and very useful feedback. So we'll move on from here. Thank you very much.
Do we need to go?
I'm sorry, giving Neil the big head here. Let me,
I forgot.
Just for the minutes, do we know who, did
Yeah, we
somebody
didn't
ever
get,
say who that was?
we didn't get
Neil
introduced to
Bott.
Neil.
Neil Bott, I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
I mean, I know Jeff knows, but I didn't see that name on anything that was submitted, and I'm not familiar with that gentleman, so,
Oh,
just for
it
public
should be.
reasons.
Oh, I didn't put it in there. But yeah, I've worked with Neil on
And
some
for the
other things.
minutes. Okay.
We're good hands. All right, thank you all. And then
Thank you.
that's, we addressed the question that I had earlier regarding Grove Avenue, so I'm good on that. And so unless you all had anything,
I just have a suggestion as they were talking about coming back, with the summer months coming on, we might want to just ask everybody, okay, when, assuming people don't have short-term plans, but with the
I
vacation
don't have any
season.
plan.
Like
I don't get vacation, but
we weren't talking about you, John.
I know.
I won't be here for the June meeting, for example, and I think it would be, instead of doing this on an ad hoc, a week before, let's just ask everybody, I mean, a lot of our vacations are foreseeable. So we have 2 out for June. I mean,
You're right, yeah, and I appreciate
so
that.
could you do that? Are you two?
No.
Tyler, okay. You're gonna be here for June
Oh, actually, what day is our June meeting?
It's June 18th.
18th.
And,
Yes, I will actually be leaving town the day after.
all right, I will make sure I do that. I will
Just
check.
maybe through August. I don't know. I don't know if August is a vacation month like others, but in somebody's world they are. It is.
You all want to adjourn?
So we're not going to speak about guidelines then?
Not tonight.
No,
Do
no,
you
no.
want to just talk about an update and where, like a plan?
I will be coming,
I'm the one who doesn't want to talk about it.
I don't
just
have
thought
to
maybe-
have a discussion,
just-
but I think
yeah.
deadlines are the way that get things done and just.
James and I are, James and I were talking about that earlier today, and we want to just come forward to you with his discussion, his suggestions, and with 4 of us here, and I just honestly, I don't have the bandwidth right now to even think about it. So,
I haven't written West Main, and
It's okay.
I don't get freed up until like July 1st at the earliest to even look at it. I'm sorry, I know that other members have been really diligent about their rewrites. I'm
I don't know which ones you're talking about.
here,
Ron was the first.
scholar
one.
athlete, and Ron. But, so I feel bad, but I just don't, I might be able to do it before then, but, possibly in June, but of course then I'm not here for June's meetings. Not helping.
But yeah, we started markups October of '23.
Mhm.
Now we started in 2017, I think.
We kind of went over all of them, like, with comments, we just didn't do edits in a formal submission, but we all, did that first pass.
I mean, I want to encourage that. I told James a couple weeks ago, if I, had a week to not have to respond to any email or anything, I could sit down and go through the whole guidelines and.
Hear ya.
Wouldn't that be
And
nice?
what would I face at the end of that week of not responding to anything? So, no, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be flippant. I really have no, I am afraid at the moment, and so I'm not able to give you anything intelligible unless you all want to have a discussion amongst yourselves.
Oh, no, I don't think we wanted to discuss it, and we're just
Can
wondering
I,
if.
can
we
I
could-
move to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Second.
Approved.
Oh my God, you brought it.
Hi, are we adjourned? Did we vote?
Yeah, did they turn off the sound?
Are we all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Yes, okay.